Alibaba's huge browser business, one of which is UCWeb, one of its subsidiaries, and by some measures, the fourth largest browser in the world. It was revealed today by Forbes that, in fact, they are not a privacy browser as they are kind of pitched. So for US readers and kind of viewers, we might not be so familiar with this web portal. It's particularly popular in China, but it is a huge one and is sort of pitched as like an incognito mode for the web. Unfortunately, security researchers found that that was not the case, and browsing histories and other kind of fingerprinting data was being sent back not just to UCWeb's servers, but also to Alibaba servers in China's mainland. So I think this is another kind of interesting data point as we see sort of this burgeoning privacy space as it gains more importance. It just shows that just because somebody's pitching its thing as private does not mean it is actually private. But Naomi, as my fellow kind of privacy advocate on the panel, I want to toss this one to you for initial reactions.
Yeah, I think that that's such a good point where, we're looking at today's world where privacy is coming more to a fore in people's mindsets, which is great. But that also means that privacy is being used as a buzzword in terms of marketing ploys, and people are throwing around words like encryption. And there was that big scandal recently, with Zoom, where they were saying, oh yeah, it's end-to-end encryption, but they just redefined end-to-end encryption to mean something completely different to what the InfoSec community actually defines as end-to-end encryption. Yeah. So, there are all these kind of slippery slopes in the privacy world when it comes to marketing. And I just think you need to be really careful out there. It is difficult for the layman to understand what they're actually getting when they think they're buying a privacy product. And so it's really helpful just to have privacy-focused companies out there that are educating people about this, not just putting out products and saying, this is the most private phone ever. This is the most private browser. Like actually teaching people, what's important, what to look for. Some great resources that I would encourage people to look at. Freedom of the Press Foundation. You have Snowden as the president of that. They put out some amazing resources where they teach people about what's actually a good VPN, what's just probably harvesting your data and selling it to advertisers, all of that sort of stuff. So I'd recommend people dive into those details. But I'll throw it to you, Jen. What are your thoughts on this article? And do you think the mainstream population really understands how much their privacy is being violated, even when they use things like incognito mode on browsers like this?
Yeah, well, there was some nice imagery in that article of someone taking your information and putting it into a suitcase and just running away. And I think that if it doesn't hit home for you, I don't know what will. I think when the everyday person is using the internet, I don't think that they know that there are as many bad actors or people who want their information out there as there are. I think a lot of people just take things at face value. You say that this is an incognito browser, so I'm going to use the browser, and I'm probably not going to think much more about it. On that note, Ben, I wanted you to kind of explain how this browsing history can contribute to digital fingerprinting so that people can understand how this information can be used against them.
Sure. I think that, what I've been thinking of, and particularly in relation to this article, but one of the, all the different privacy articles and security articles that I read and think about is I was talking with Zuko Wilcox, I think it was last year when I was working on a big kind of like future of the internet piece. And he likened it to, look, like the web was not built for privacy. He kind of said it's essentially like a leaky bucket that has like 15, 30, 50, however many holes you want in it. And there's just kind of information spilling out of all of these things. And so, Naomi, to your point again, right, there is no panacea for privacy. You're not going to be able to probably plug all of those holes simultaneously with one thing, but you can use discrete tools to stop certain information flows from getting out there. And in regards to kind of this, browsing histories are incredibly important. They really show your behavior. It shows what you were looking at. It shows what you're thinking about buying. It shows, what information you're consuming. It shows maybe what sort of dissent you're fomenting in some countries. Particularly, I think, if we look at the ways that digital crackdowns happen in countries like China around the Great Firewall and other things. And so, we spend so much of our lives online that increasingly that's a better behavioral kind of fingerprint than maybe some of the things we actually do IRL. So that's kind of how I think about this one. I do think too, it points to some of the issues around centralized entities versus decentralization, right? Naomi, you spoke about VPNs and those sorts of things. And there are various DVPN products, decentralized VPNs that don't hold those centralized repositories of data that they could, market off the back end to advertisers, right? And in looking at any of this, I think it's really, really important that, people think about it and they also look at like the business models, right? Like what is the way that this company is going to be making money and how might your data be sort of implicated in that? But Naomi, I'll toss it right back to you.
Yeah, I'll just mention that when you're dealing with companies like this, where there's such an egregious breaking of trust, where they're advertising something and not delivering it, you're not always going to get like repercussions from government either. So don't expect that, because in a lot of cases, it's the government that's actually enabling this and wanting them to put in these backdoors and get the data. I mean, that's what governments do. They want to collect as much information as possible. I wouldn't be surprised if Beijing, mandated that Alibaba do this. I think that Alibaba is under the thumb of the government in particular right now, especially after their IPO was cancelled, and then you had the head just kind of go missing for a while, and no one's really heard from Jack Ma, and so I think that there are probably a lot of things that they make these tech companies do in terms of collecting information. But Anna, I'll throw this to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I very, very much resonated with the thesis that Ben said, that internet is actually a leaky bucket of data. And, I don't think that any country is actually immune to that. The mentioned Snowden revealed that some really massive things have been happening in the US as well. So given that most people actually have no capacity to check how actually privacy protecting are those tools that they're using, like I cannot go into the code of my web browser or whatever app I'm using and see what's going on with my data via the code. So probably the best rule for anyone who wants to protect their privacy is, just watch what you share. Nothing is 100 private. Nothing is 100 protected on the internet. If your data is on the internet, be prepared for it to be leaked or stolen.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, I push back against the self-censorship idea. Like, I understand completely what you're saying. Do be careful with what you're doing, but I don't want to see a world where people have to tread on eggshells because everything they're doing online is, being leaked. I would rather see a world where people are just embracing the privacy products and the companies who are trying their best to give us better privacy and decentralized tools. I think the more support we can give these people, the better, we'll be as a society as a whole. So we won't have to, self-censor in that regard. But a lot to think about.